That is mind-blowing. Everyone listening to this needs to understand whatever is in a trust is not yours. It is not yours. It does not belong to you. It belongs to the trust. The trust is an entity. If you work super hard in your business, maybe you exited your business, you've sold it for 200 million rand, someone comes to you with a shiny suit and says, let's put that money in this offshore trust. They tell you, don't come here, just you won't be a trustee. What you have done is given all your money away or donated it or whatever, put it into this trust, and you no longer ever have control over it.
Depending on the country you're dealing with, there's gift or what we refer to as donation. So you could have triggered a donations tax. You could have triggered gift taxes depending on the country you're working with. So you cannot hide from tax. You can't get away from tax. So when someone, like you say, Bryan, in a shiny suit comes to you and tells you about all the tax you're not going to pay, understand this, please. Tax will be paid. It just depends where and when.
Welcome back to another episode of the Enough Club. And today we're going to talk about something extremely important, and that is estate planning. Why is estate planning important? I bet you I could save you and your family more money from good estate planning than I could ever create through investment returns. And so today we're going to focus and knuckle down on this conversation. And with me, I've got a special guest, I think our first guest, technical expert at the Enough Club, and it's Renate Jute. Renate, I'm going to hand over to you. Please tell us who you are or what you do and who you do it for.
Thanks, Bryan, and thanks for having me. What I do is estate planning for high net worth individuals, estate administration, but the why for me is more important. I want to really leave it better than I find it. And I have an intense passion to make sure that there is no uncertainty and that people don't pay more than they should. I mean, taxes, that is. So for me, my clients are generally the financial planners, auditors, accountants, attorneys, advocates. They would refer their clients to me so that I can do high-level estate planning and then eventually the estate administration of these individuals. But it's more about legacy planning, holistic planning, than just the financial planning. Because I find often that when you just look at financial planning, it is disjointed. Very few people look at it as a holistic plan. So that's really what I do. I try and bring it holistically into a bundle.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because that actually sums up our philosophy. You talked about being disjointed, and financial advice and planning or personal finance is actually holistic. And just for you out there in YouTube land or Spotify, then what that means is money touches every aspect of your life. Unfortunately, the only thing that is involved in every aspect of your life is money. And so, you know, if you spend X amount, if you invest X amount, if you earn X amount, that all has an impact on each other. How you invest is directly linked to how much you earn. So when it comes to holistic, you have to look at the big picture. And unfortunately, what we have found in our experience while serving the families that we do is that you do often have a trust, for example, and things are managed in that trust, but it doesn't speak to what the family need that money for. You know, they invest in a lot of fixed assets that produce rental, but they like to go out and buy big things. And so there's a disconnect. And so that's why people like Renate come in and then look at everything to make sure it speaks to the overall plan and that a decision up here doesn't affect someone poorly down there. But that's my 2 cents. So thanks very much for that introduction. And just to summarize, people like myself, lawyers and accountants, will come to you with the clients and say, wow, this is a little bit of above our certification, and you're able to come in and provide those opinions and that advice on how to structure things. And so I know for a fact that you have probably seen many estates before. So in your experience doing this, what are some of the most common mistakes or errors, red flags that you see these families make over and over again when they do maybe their own estate planning?
For me, what I find is often people play it, what I've experienced, close to the vest. So the more technical, the wealthier the client, the closer they want to play it to the vest. They don't really want to disclose everything to one particular person. So what will happen is a certain batch of information will be disclosed to a certain person, and another batch of information gets disclosed to another party. And I've entered into spaces where I've then realized, but hold on a minute, this stuff does not make sense. And when you start tying these things together, the information now almost clashes. So you're creating a bigger tax liability, or you're creating risk for the client rather than protection. So that's the one thing I've seen, playing it too close to the vest. The other thing is multiple advisors or multiple financial planners. In itself, that's not a problem. When it does become a problem is when these people are not aware of one another and they're not working together holistically. So I've seen that often. So, like trying to hide planners from one another makes no sense. I truly, truly believe that not everyone can specialize in every field. That's why I specialize in the field I do, and why people come to me for the advice that I offer. So it's important that you may have a wealth planner, an investment planner. You may have an estate planner. You may have a tax planner. But these people need to holistically work together. And that brings me to my third point. And I was discussing this morning with someone that I'm busy wrapping up an estate for, well, the deceased father, where the person, and I met with him 2 years prior to the death. I went through the entire thing and I explained the risk they were running with the taxes and not declaring things. And now we are in a position where the estate is liable for huge capital gains tax, estate duty, because of the way they were doing things. So the financial planner, the company accountant, the tax advisor, and let's call it myself, that were then brought in, none of us were working together, because in the end, when I was saying, well, you need to start paying taxes, you need to start planning this, the old man went, no, don't worry, I'll work with my own attorney that will keep my will. Didn't want to change his will, didn't want to follow advice. I said, no problem. But now the families come to me to do the estate. And I often say, there's only so much lipstick you can put on a pig, because I can't fix the problems now. Now the only way you're going to fix this problem is by paying the tax. So that's what happens, is you also have the wealthier your individual, the more players there will be. Planners, tax consultants, accountants. You will have more and more players. And if these people cannot work together and you are sort of building walls between these people, you are creating this disjointed profile, portfolio for yourself, which will trigger taxes, and it will trigger estate delays when it does come to wrapping up that estate, which of course lands very poorly for your loved ones. So those are I think, the three main things that I can say.
Okay, thanks for fleshing that out so well, because you've mentioned, I think, two things that we have just kind of covered to a degree in previous podcasts. So we released 3 episodes now on trusts. It was 3 parts because it's actually such a meaty topic. And what we found is, with the families that we work with, we're a new company. We've been around for about 3 years now. And so a lot of our clients, we're accruing now. So we're being appointed. So there's a lot of seeing things for the first time. We have 3 families we're currently working with who've appointed us in the last 6 or so months. We have now been appointed as kind of the overarching planner or advisor for that family. And there are other financial planners involved, other wealth management firms. And when we look at this and we ask the family, why did you do this? You've got so many millions of rands being invested with this company and so many millions with that company. And then the one made the husband's will and the one made the wife's will. And none of them are managing the trust. It's actually by a different firm. And what they said was that things were just all over the place, and they didn't know if they were coming or going. And they had started growing a fear that there was going to be this disjointed plan that they have, or disjointed estate. And what we I don't know if maybe you can add to this now when I wrap up, but what we found was that they said they felt they needed to diversify to hedge their bets. So they have one advisor manage this and one advisor manage that. And then what they, they're hoping that at least, maybe one of them, if they fail, the other one gets it right and they still have money. What are some of the reasons why what are the reasons you've heard from people when they say, we have these multiple advisors?
So it's funny, they seldom will disclose why they have multiple. My view's been that they try and keep it close to the vest. They don't want to divulge everything to everyone. And like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with having multiple people. But if you're going to have multiple people, make sure it's multiple people that specialize in different fields. It doesn't help. You've got 2 or 3 wealth planners. And when I say wealth planners, I'm referring to investment planners. Okay. Because they're all going to have a different view. So now what happens is you're being pulled in all different directions. Do you actually have an investment planner or a wealth planner that sits down with you as a family and says, what are your desires? What are your wishes? What do you want to see going forward? What is the action plan for the children? One of the first questions I ask my clients when I have to do estate planning is when they start talking about their heirs and their beneficiaries. Like, I stop right there. How old are these heirs and beneficiaries, and where will they be in the next 5 years? Will they be in South Africa or will they be in a different country? And that question just blows them out the water, because all of a sudden they go like, but what does that have to do with it? And I'm going, well, taxes. Because no one thinks about these things. And I think that's the question. When you want to work with multiple people, we still have to have the vision. What is the vision of the family? What are their heart matters? What is their true north? For me, those are the important things, because only once we understand the psychology of that family can we really advise, can we move in a direction. And then from there, that needs to be assessed annually. So multiple people, nothing wrong with that, but make sure that they all work together holistically. And I like the idea of what you said, that you guys as a company are almost like the overarching umbrella now, where you bring everyone in underneath and go, okay, we are going to deal with this, but holistically, we will make sure that this pulls in the same direction. What I have seen over the years, I mean, I've been in the trust game since, geez, like, one shouldn't say that, but the Twin Towers, that's how long ago. I've been in trusts that long. And the one thing I find now with families that's been in trusts that long, back then, all they wanted to do was diversify. So many trusts separate things. They want to create separation. Here's the problem. These people are now older. Their children have left the country, or their children have their own lives. And all of a sudden, people are going, we want to simplify. This is just too much to keep track of. It's costing too much, because everything has an advisor, everything has an independent trustee, everything has an accountant. Everything needs brain power. You need to apply your mind to everything. So we're trying to rather minimize than to maximize. So they're trying to now bring things closer to home. So it's so interesting what you're saying, is people are going like, no, we want to separate, we want to diversify. And then 10 years later, believe you me, they will start wanting to bring it all together and go, this is problematic. Because here's the thing. You will have a main driver, let's say the main breadwinner, behind this, let's separate, let's diversify, let's invest everywhere. My question is always, what's that main party falls over? The person that's left behind holding the ball, do they know what your plan was? Can they manage this very complex structure that you've put together? Because if they can't, we need to do something different.
Yeah.
I hope
And
that
just to,
answers.
no, it definitely does. Thanks. That was like such an in-depth answer. So I'm going to take that answer and break it up into 3 more questions. So I think,
Sure.
so the first thing is, when we have been appointed to these families for financial affairs and that, what we have seen is that the amount of overlap between various wealth managers or advisors or CFPs or whatever, there was just redundancies created and extra layers of fees in that. And so we generally tend to take it from having one firm with their wealth manager and their accountant and their fiduciary team, and another firm and their wealth manager and accountant and fiduciary team. We tend to strip it down and simplify it simply. And we say, it is now us as financial planners. We oversee this with you. We're in the helicopter. And then every now and again, we zoom in on an area and we go down to that area. And at that area is a lawyer waiting for us. And they're going to help us with something. And we go back in the helicopter and we look up and there's a tax accountant and we go down there. And so no one in the value chain can see everything that the founder, if it's a trust, for example, what the founder or the person, the primary like trustee is seeing, because they got eyes on everything. And then secondly, obviously, if you have a partner like a financial planner to sit with you to go through it, they've got the holistic view, and then they can focus on getting specialists in. So it's kind of like running a business. And this is what I wanted to get to with something you said earlier on. You said there's limited info given out sometimes and secrets. What I mean by that is that you said they won't give all the information out to someone who's helping or consulting to the family for whatever reason. Now, the more and more I've done this, especially with the wealthier and wealthier families that we work with, we're seeing that you've really got to run the family kind of office, the family financials, kind of like you run a business. And in a business, you will not keep secret things from the next department or division. You're all working towards the same outcome or goal. So have you ever heard from people why or do you have any idea as to why some of these, wealthy people are kind of holding back, keeping the cards close to their vest, so to speak, like you mentioned?
Maybe in certain instances it's unintentional. They just don't think that the other party needs to know, maybe. In other instances, I think they believe that they are managing tax, if one wants to put it that way, managing their tax affairs. In other instances, I literally am dealing with a client where the person is married in community of property. So that's our first problem. And everything is in the one party's name. So where I'm going with, it's not the marital regime that's the problem, but everything is registered in the one party's name. But now we understand that actually it's for both parties. And this individual has a financial planner or two that I've dealt with in the past, and the two people didn't know about one another or the portfolios. And then what happens is this person has gone and invested offshore through various people. So he will deal, he literally had different types of investments in 6 offshore jurisdictions. So none of those were through the local guys. So, for instance, in the Seychelles, he was dealing with someone in the Seychelles. In the US, he was dealing with someone US. In the UK, he was dealing with someone UK. So now you understand that the UK, he didn't have a local guy that could do the UK stuff. But rather than going to the local guy and say, local guy, here's my UK guy, you guys need to communicate. And local guy, here's my US guy, you guys need to communicate. He kept everything separate because in his mind, he's going like, but it's a US thing. It's got nothing to do with the local guy. But from an estate planning point of view, it is imperative, because when I started doing his estate planning and I started showing him the different taxes and the estate liabilities he was creating for himself, he couldn't comprehend it. He was like, no, but I'm only going to deal with the South African estate. And I was like, no, it doesn't work like that. So I think it's also, because we specialize in our fields, we think, but surely everyone knows. But they don't. They may be an engineer. They can tell you anything about engineering. They don't understand financial planning. It's not their field. They don't need to understand it because they pay someone to understand it for them. And so that may also be a reason. I don't say it's with malice. It's just on a need to know basis. And I didn't think the local guy needed to know about the US guy. So I don't think it's necessarily with malice. Yeah, like I said, sometimes the personal tax planning may be questionable. But yeah, I think that's often what happens, is that it's just not thought through properly.
Yeah. I suppose sometimes people don't know what they don't know. And that is something we have to work on a lot with the families that we serve. Something that you said now, it's so common, and that is that people will go and use an advisor here, use an advisor there, a Mauritian advisor, a US advisor, a British advisor, and they'll set up. The big thing is obviously to set up ETF portfolios. So basically, invest in an index, and it's cheaper with companies like BlackRock and Vanguard if you go directly to them on their own platforms, which are based in various parts of the world. We also have a lot of we've seen a lot of people. In fact, today we're moving several million out of an Interactive Brokers account, which is a US domiciled company, which a local South African has set up a large investment portfolio. He pointed us, and we just showed them the problem. Now, someone might be listening now and saying, well, what problem is there if I invest in a US company, or I invest in this Mauritian or Seychelles business or whatever? Maybe you can just give us a bit of a brief on what are the issues when it comes to just putting your money into that jurisdiction and just investing in their ETFs, for example.
So as a South African, if you are a South African resident, you are taxed on death. You are taxed on your worldwide assets. Doesn't matter where it is. Now, let's say, for instance, I'm going to take US and UK. If you have assets in the US, United States, your first 60,000 US dollars is exempt. Thereafter, you will pay anywhere between 18 and 40% in taxes. So that's now the CITES taxes. Now, also bear in mind that in the States, you've got if I can call it the overall, the CITES taxes, but then you've also got area taxes, like the region taxes, if I can. Okay. But now here's the problem. People go, yeah, but I'm going to get that tax back because I'm also paying tax in South Africa because there's a DTI, there's a double taxation, or DTA, double taxation agreement. 100% there's a double tax agreement. But here's the story. If you pay 40% CITES tax in America, in the US, but in South Africa, you've paid 20% tax. All that'll happen is, because you've now paid 20% estate duty, all that'll happen is SARS may, if you comply with everything, give you back the 20%. You've still paid 40% on the other side. So you can do planning till you're blue in the face. That does not make that problem go away. Because so often people have come to me and said, but that person told me I'm not going to pay tax there. Like, for instance, in Mauritius. I'm not going to pay tax in Mauritius. No, you're not. You're going to pay it here in South Africa. And you're going to pay on the currency fluctuation. So not only do you pay on the value of the asset, but you also pay on the fluctuation in currency. Now, in the UK, you've got £325,000, which is like their threshold. Thereafter, you will pay their taxes, which I think is, and I made a note of it here, 40%. So you go above that. Now think about this. Your child went and studied overseas in the UK, and then you thought, it's nice, and we've got some family also living there, so we're going to buy ourselves a little flat. But our little flat cost us £500,000. So you're already over that threshold. So you're going to pay 40% tax on the amount above 325. And that's what we need to understand. But it gets better. If you buy now, you also get to pay tax in South Africa because you're going to pay estate duty in South Africa. Now, Some countries have capital gains tax, some countries don't have capital gains tax. You need to understand which country you're dealing with. Then, just because we've got a rollover provision in South Africa, so, oh, my spouse inherits it, so they don't pay the tax. Some countries do have rollover provisions, but, and here's the but, your spouse will only enjoy that rollover provision should your spouse be resident in that country at the time. So just because your spouse is in South Africa, that spouse ain't getting the rollover provision in the US.
Yeah.
Even if it is a US citizen, they have to be resident there. Because that's what's happening. People from all over the world are marrying one another, living in different countries, and then thinking that that country where they come from's laws will apply. But it depends on, is it resident-based? Is it birthright-based? Is it a term where, the term that you're there for based? That's what we need to understand.
Yeah.
So I've gone a bit off topic, but yeah, you need to understand that if you invest in a different country, we have to deal with their taxes, our taxes, and the different types of taxes. It's not just
Exactly.
estate or situs.
Exactly. So thanks for that. Once again, you covered quite a few bullet points that I wanted to mention, and that was estate planning for foreign jurisdictions is not a joke. And so if you are deciding to expand your portfolio, you may be earning a lot, you're starting to put a lot of money away. Yeah, by all means go offshore. But if you watch some of our podcasts in the past, some of the episodes there, you will see we talk about how to do it in a responsible way. So in a way that makes sure you don't have to have a foreign executor, because you can imagine now, you talked about that person who's got investments in the US, for example. It's not going to be Johnny in Bedfordview, who's your lawyer, is going to wrap up that estate. It's going to be, and it depends on the state in the US as well. So it could be California, and their laws would be very different to maybe Texas. And so you're going to have a lawyer there, and their rates are not South African rates. They're definitely not in the same WhatsApp group. So it's going to be very expensive. And after they've taken their 40% and they've wound up the estate, you're probably left with nothing. I was on a call a while back, last year or the year before, with foreign financial planners. It was a kind of a cross-jurisdictional financial planning discussion. And at the time, a copy and paste, a cut and paste will, templated with no changes excepting you insert your name and surname and your ID number, in the UK was £550 a person. And that was regarded as cheap. So that was about 2-3 years ago that this financial planner said it. And they're part of a firm that has their own law firm, and they give it discounted to their own clients, and they come in at like 400 odd or something, and they get a lot of clients that way. So you can just imagine if 3 years ago they were charging £550 a will cheap, how much will they charge to wrap up that estate? And so I can imagine, like you mentioned earlier on as well, the tax problems you saw. If I'm not mistaken, this is what you're talking about. It's the upon death type of taxes. And then secondly, people also open offshore trusts, for example, to get the money away from South Africa. Okay, fine. But each country in the world, regardless if it's Europe, each of the little countries in Europe, they will also have their own problems. They will have their own laws about money and proceeds and what gets taxed and how it gets taxed. And then you got the third hurdle. People have been told in the past to go buy a property in this country or buy a property in that country and invest in that country. But then those countries, especially all the countries around the Mediterranean, they have something I know of called forced heirship.
Yep.
So you didn't want to leave this to your eldest son, but now they've got it because those are the laws. I imagine you've probably seen when it comes to offshore, people moving money there, people trying to, because I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of resentment towards the South African government. So people kind of have been active, participating in a bit of a tax boycott, if I can call it that. The last thing people want to do is pay tax. We feel very bad about paying the tax, and so they look to move it offshore and hopefully hide it from SARS. And I'm sure you've come across some of the fallout from that because people are doing it without thinking it through. Is there any sort of example you can think of where you've just seen something and you think, okay, well, that's going to be a HALSA problem one day. Let's undo this.
So Yeah, number one, your days of hiding from SARS is gone because all the countries are now reporting to one another. So hiding it, very difficult. You have to declare the money to get it out of the country. What you then do with it in the other country, that's up to you. But in the end, you still get taxed on your worldwide assets. Now, let's say you have gone and put it into an offshore structure. That offshore structure is managed by who or whom? And what fees are you paying for those structures? And what are your rights? I had a client that came to me and he was wild cross because he had set up a Mauritian trust. He thought that it would work like his South African trust with his assets. So
Yeah.
he just sent an email through to the Mauritian guys and said, listen, I need this money. And they were like, no, we don't think so. We need the following documents. We need to understand what it's for. Long story, long story. So he came to me and he said, I want my stuff. You need to sort this out. I said, stop right there. Who told you to open this Mauritian trust? Because now he was very upset. And he said, no, but they had done all the planning and he did it specifically to save tax. Okay? So he had set up businesses and he was doing all these trust things. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's not where I'm going. Where I'm going is understanding that you've got horses for courses. So once I did the calculation for this person on the actual rand for rand saving, South African income tax saving, because he did it now for income tax, not estate taxes, income tax saving versus the money he was paying to run the trust and the fees and the accounting fees and the trustee fees and whatever, and the taxes on that side. He was literally saving 1% tax, 1%. And he wasn't a guy that was turning to 300 million a year. 1% on 200 million, you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
But he was like, if it was 1%, it was a lot, because this is where people get caught out. Oh, look, you pay 27, 28% in South Africa, you've got this VAT, and in another country, it's a lower tax rate. Perhaps, but when you set up that structure, what is the setup cost? What's the ongoing cost? And how do we manage it? Because for it to be managed in that country, the minute you get involved, where's the effective place of management? The minute you, as the South African, is involved, the effective place of management is, from a South African point of view, and SARS will tax it. So now you have to go, okay, well, I'm not a trustee, I'm not involved, it's the other people. Guess what just happened? You ain't part of the decisions. And this is, I think, where people, it becomes very short-sighted. We don't do the full calculations, or the clients aren't told the whole story, if I can say that in the nicest possible term.
Yeah.
It's almost like the story of, no, if you take your property and you use a usufruct to put it in the trust, then you're not going to pay transfer duty, and that usufruct doesn't disappear, dear. You're going to pay way more when you die one day.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay capital gains tax through your ears when you try and sell that property. It's the same thing. People need to have all the facts before they can make these decisions, but they're not given all the facts.
Yeah.
They are told a quarter of the facts, and because they are dealing with professionals, above board professionals, they believe they've been told the whole story. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know. And I'm not saying because they're stupid, not at all. I wouldn't know what to ask my motor car mechanic if I took my car in. It's not my business. I pay him and the person must fix the car.
Yeah.
But the people don't know what to ask. So they get given the rosy picture, and then at the end of the day, they don't know what it's going to cost them. And that's the same for the estates. So you move all these things offshore, and then you land up with these ongoing costs. I've got another client that I've been advising. She's got an offshore trust and a local trust. So the local trust is for a special needs child. The offshore trust has a lot of money in it. I haven't been privy to where the money came from. I was reached out to recently to advise on what is the next step. Why? Because the founder and trustee is getting on in age, as in late age, and husband has just been diagnosed with dementia. So now the offshore trust says the following: either the founder or the trustee or a descendant of them, can be the trustees and the beneficiaries. And the trust has a 100-year clause. This is in a different country. I won't discuss the country. It's just in a different country. So I'm like, so I read through this trust deed and I'm like, okay, I've got a couple of queries here. May I meet with the trustees? Yes. So I set up a meeting with the trustees. First of all, I get to meet with a person that cannot answer my questions. Like, I bet you the trustee. Yeah, but this is a very old trust. It's now recently in my portfolio. To me, that's not an excuse. If you're taking money from my client, you should know what you're talking about. Then I start raising these issues and I go, I'm referring to clause so and so, clause so and so, clause so and so. Please answer this. And the person couldn't answer anything. Person comes back to me. No, well, we could possibly change these, but it would have to go to the court of this country. So I said, okay, not a problem, not a problem. So I went back to the client and I said, here are my concerns. If you die today, we have a disabled husband and a disabled daughter, and you have got not 1 million, hundreds of million in an offshore trust. Now what? And in the local trust, even worse. Who are the trustees? The mother and the father. And then the beneficiaries are it's only the special needs daughter. So I was looking at it and going, but we could put the husband on now as a special needs as well. But here's our problem. Who's our follow-up trustees? And so who's the follow-up trustee? And this was my big concern, is that people don't review their documents ever. So that's a concern. You've got these outdated structures, and I think that's something that we would talk about later, but overseas, but local as well. So it's not just an overseas problem, it's a local problem as well.
Yeah. When you say things like, I've got an old trust, the hair goes up at the back of my neck because I think, okay, what is the problem here? And I get the trust deeds from our clients and I see that it was typed. And since then, it has been scanned into the computer and there are no amendments. And I think, okay, the laws have changed so much in the last even 10, 15 years that a trust is by no means what it used to be. But I think you're still running this like an old trust, which is basically like a semi-alter ego. You're just kind of running it as an extension of yourself. Massive problem there. Just something, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier on. You said that people were coming to this client and saying, you should set this up, the offshore this and the do that. And this is something I think everyone out there listening to needs to understand. It's a very important point that you will get sold to. When you're wealthy, you're earning a lot more, you start showing up on the radars of quite a few companies and you will get sold to. And I'll give an example of this, a real case study. So last year, a client appointed us and they mentioned that, they've got also a family that had 2 advisors, 2 wealth management firms, highly reputable, good people. But they said that the one firm said to them they need to move these many tens of millions. They need to move it offshore and definitely need to put it into an offshore trust. But it's they called it like a pension trust. Now that already just, to me, those things are such black holes. But anyway, so they said it was a pension type trust. And so I said, okay, tell me about that. And they said they don't know much about it, but apparently I won't really pay tax anymore and it's going to be the best type of thing ever. So I said, okay, the name of the firm, please. And she gives me the name and the details. So we carry on the meeting and I take it, all under consideration. And I go online on that business's website. And one of the tabs is our offshore pension option. And it's liberally called an offshore pension, but it's a trust and it's an offshore trust and it's in a certain jurisdiction. You put money in and then it pays you out. and they're just calling it a pension for some reason. I don't know why. And so they were sold to. And then I told them about, the ins and outs of it, taking the money abroad firstly, and then the tax treatment of it, and running that will cost money. That's why they run it in their business. And at the end of the day, they decided, no, they're not going to do that. They just thought you're supposed to do this now when you have a certain amount of money. So you will just get sold to, but that's the thing
Yes.
that people don't like. They don't know, and that's, I think, the value of coming to someone like yourself is that
Mm.
it's an independent view of someone who you can say, okay, well, this is my view on this. You've paid me a consultation fee. Whether you open this thing with these people or send that money here to Mauritius or not, you've got my opinion, and my opinion is
Mm.
this and that. And something else you mentioned was how you did the feasibility study of the one versus the other. And that's something we do
Yes.
often because we need to help people go into a solution with their eyes wide open. And so if you say, this is the cost of taking your money and doing it, putting it into a trust, this is the potential donations tax you might pay, or interest you might have to pay or earn, or whatever the case may be, and one versus the other. And then you can kind of look at that scenario and then decide for yourself as the investor, as the client, if it's really worth your while. But what I tend to find is when I speak to the families we work with, when they have these kind of elaborate structures, they say, well, that wasn't shown to us. We were just told, look, yeah, but trust
Mhm.
me, it's going to be amazing. And so that feasibility study, that impartial view, is not something I think you'll get from a lot of the providers out there, because they have a vested interest to get you to do business with them. And so just like a bit of a bit of business development, a bit of PR for you there, is to position that service that you can provide, obviously, to colleagues of mine who have clients that need to do in-depth work, but also just families out there who are listening to this who think like, I don't know who I can trust. I've got these advisors, it's great, but I know that they've got a motive, an ulterior motive. Their business does
Mm.
this. So do
Yeah.
I trust them when they say, let's put all your money here or there? You can get an estate planning opinion, pay a fee for it, and then to get that before and after picture, and then go in with your eyes wide open. Another case study I want to mention, and then I want you to maybe add to it if you've also heard something similar. We work with a lot of accountants who do manage trusts for our clients. We generally, we have to meet with them. That's kind of our
Mm.
SLA. We meet with all of we have to be a bit of a conductor and conduct the orchestra. And so was chatting to the one, and the client said in that meeting, yeah, but can we set up the offshore trust? And I heard Malta, Malta's good and type of thing. So the accountant said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he said, no, you've got to go to Malta every year. You've got to be there, and you've got to have evidence of being there. Because if you're audited by SARS, they will say, where were you when you had the trustee meeting? Where are you controlling this from? And they said, well, I never go to Malta. I've never even been there before, but I do go to, I go to the UK once a year to visit family. So I can maybe do like a thing, but I don't know about time. And then it kind of works through their mind. They said, okay, Malta's off the cards. Can I set up one in Isle of Man? That's right next to the UK. Okay, but you've got to go there. What happens? What happens if you go through this effort and you set your offshore trust in Mauritius, for example, and now I'm in Cape Town and we have a trustee meeting, and I haven't been to Mauritius for 3 years? What what can happen to me as the investor if SARS comes and just reviews my books?
So remember earlier I referred to effective place of management.
Mm,
That's SARS's little mantra. And so they go like, where is the effective place of management? Where are the decisions taken? And if you, as a local resident, is part of the decision-making process, so you are a trustee and you are part of the decision-making process, then the effective place of management is here. It's as simple as that. And then what happens, the taxes will fall here. So the income taxes, the capital gains taxes, whatever in that trust. However, some of the trust structures are set up differently, and that is where a lot of the clients become very salty, because they are now not allowed to be trustees.
mm,
So when they they may be beneficiaries, or they are beneficiaries, but they're not trustees, and they may not be part of the decision-making process. So they, and this is what happened with this other client of mine, they need to motivate to the trustees why certain funding needs to come out of the trust. Now, remember, when the person sold them this whole story, they said, okay, you need to get this trust, then we're going to invest the money, and we're going to invest it here and there, and then it's going to grow, and you're going to just be so wealthy. Great, the guy says, let's do that. And you're not going to be a trustee, so you're not going to be taxed in South Africa. Great, let's do that. All of a sudden, the guy needs the money in his business, or he wants to buy property. Now he wants to pull that money out of the investment. Now in South Africa, what would you have done? You would have gone to your other trustees if you were so inclined. And as the trustees, you would have gone to the financial advisor and said, we need to cash in this investment. And perhaps even buy the property in the trust, or have a loan to the company, however you would set that up. Not so with Mauritius. No. Because do you think it's in their best interest to now cash in that investment? No. So now the problem is you now need to motivate, and then there's a certain period of time that needs to lapse, and it's documents up and down and resolutions up and down. It's not a story of press the button and you get your money back. Because, oh yeah, by the way, in case you forgot, you are not a trustee. You are not a main decision maker. And that is how a lot of these offshore trusts get around that effective place of management. You are not a trustee. Even the other lady I told you about with the 2 trusts, she's not a trustee on her offshore trust with hundreds of millions of rands in it. Now, I'm sorry, but that just puts a very big fear in me to say, you know what, I've got all this lots of monies. I'm not going to buy shoes. I'm going to put it in a trust where I'm not a trustee. I'm not part of the decision-making team. I'm going to be a beneficiary, and hopefully, if I'm nice, they'll give me money. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but either it's the effective place of management where you make decisions, or you have to trust other people. And there can't even be a document hidden somewhere in between that says, actually, behind the scenes, I'm still the decision maker. I've seen what those documents look like. They have to write all these motivations to say, and then the overarching law of that country, whether it be Isle of Man, whether it's Jersey, whether it's Guernsey, they've got specific laws that govern their trusts. So their trust deeds are not necessarily like our individuals' trusts. It becomes a vested trust. So the trust that I was referring to, it becomes a vested trust. So get this. The minute the money moves out of the trust to the South African person, or on death, or on year 100, because you must remember this trust is going to go for 100 years, every single cent in that trust is taxed in the hands of the founder. So now this founder dies. The founder, the person that set up, the donor or the founder, different
but
countries
they might be dead, right? So in 100 years' time, they're probably not going to be around. So how does that work?
So that's why I say either on death or on bringing the money back. Because now in this person's case, remember, we had a special needs husband, a special needs daughter. So now we don't know what we need to do. So now we need to bring the money back, because after her death, we can't appoint other people because of how their jurisdiction works. So now we seriously need to investigate this, and we go, well, the only way we can deal with this is to say, on her death, the trust will be closed and the money will go into her estate. So it can't even pay into the special trust. From her estate, it can pay to the special trust. So what happens? The money has been there making money babies. Certainly, she's had the tax saving in South Africa on the money babies there. But here's what's going to happen. She's going to be taxed on the capital and the money babies when it comes to South Africa. So, at least she'll have the money to pay because it's investments. But what when it is property? What is it like for instance, the client I was talking about that has assets in 6 different jurisdictions? I'm talking company shares. I'm talking immovable property. I'm talking shares. Now remember, first of all, we have to perhaps dispose of those assets because, by the way, in South Africa, he's got hardly anything. And he's got multiple trusts, all of which have loan accounts owing to him. But the trusts don't have money in them. They've got properties, but they owe him. So we've got his estate has all these assets. Oh, but we forgot married community of property. So either him or his wife has to die, and we just trigger all of a sudden this estate. But now we don't have liquidity because we have to pay estate taxes and capital gains taxes. Oh, and we're paying it in all the different jurisdictions. So we're not even working just with one estate. We may work with 6 different countries' estates. So you see how that can delay the process. And in the meanwhile, this family goes, well, how are we supposed to eat? Where's the money?
Yeah, you can't
Because
eat brick
even
and
me, I'm
mortar.
taking all. Yeah, no, I'm taking all the money. I'm not leaving my money in this country. I'm taking all the money overseas.
That is absolutely insane. You know, when you mentioned, I mean, you mentioned so much there that I'm trying to think of all the different points that I just freaked out at. But the first one was, I mean, I did know this, but to hear it from you, it actually just lays out how insanely bonkers this is. And that is that if you have this offshore trust where you decide, or maybe you were sold the idea of not being a trustee. Now, everyone listening to this needs to understand whatever is in a trust is not yours. It is not yours. And if you ever sit in front of SARS and they ask you about your trust, you never say, my trust, my money. Okay.
Never.
It is not yours. It does not belong to you. It belongs to the trust. The trust is an entity. It is a legal person type of thing. It exists and it has the money that you had before in it. And now, if you work super hard in your business, maybe you exited your business, you've sold it for, I don't know, 200 million Rand. Someone comes to you with a shiny suit and says, let's put that money in this offshore trust. And now they do that and they say, but look here, we're in the Cayman Islands. You're going to fly 80 hours to get to the Cayman Islands. So you're not going to go there every year, once or twice, to make decisions as a trustee. So they tell you, don't come here, just you won't be a trustee. What you have done is given all your money away or donated it or whatever, put it into this trust, and you no longer ever have control over it. That is mind blowing. And people do that just to try and minimize tax to a degree.
And here's the other problem. That 80 million you were referring to, that has magically jumped into the trust, that money, that didn't disappear. You created either a loan account to yourself, or depending on the country you're dealing with, there's gift or what we refer to as donation. So you could have triggered a donations tax. You could have triggered gift taxes, depending on the country you're working with. It's a loan account. If you have a loan account with a local trust, we've got Section 7C. If you've got offshore trust loan accounts, there's different tax structures there. And oh yeah, by the way, you have to declare these loan accounts. They can't just magically happen. You have to declare these things through the Reserve Bank. So you cannot hide from tax. You can't get away from tax. So when someone, like you say, Bryan, in a shiny suit comes to you and tells you about all the tax you're not going to pay, understand this, please. Tax will be paid. What the person may be alluding to is you may not pay tax on a particular something in a particular country, but tax will be paid. It just depends where and when. But tax never disappears. Death and taxes, those are the 2 certainties.
Well, those are the 2 certainties, but I'll add to that death with taxes, and I often say that I say that in videos. I say estate duty is the tax you pay for the privilege of dying in the country you live in. So I'm not a fan of estate duty. I think it's a double taxation on a taxpayer, but at the same time, it's due wherever you live. And as we heard earlier on, it's worse in the US, it's worse in the UK. So you don't necessarily want to get too tangled up in their tax laws. We haven't even touched on wills. We could probably have to do another session maybe, but there's this last question I have for you, Renate. I know that I'm eating into your time and you've been very generous. Thank you.
Not at all.
But if you look at local trusts, for example, you mentioned Section 7C. That is a law for those out there who are listening that says it regulates how much money you can put in and well, not how much money you can put into a trust, but any assets or money you put into a trust If it's deemed as a donation, you pay tax on that, or if the proceeds of it are deemed as a donation, there's potential knock-on effects. Basically, you can't just move money around. There are now tax consequences, and if you give some money to family members, children, or whatever, there are potential donations that are deemed to have happened. So with all of that and Section 25, which we won't even get into, it's obvious to me that trusts are not what they once were. So when you assess someone's financials and someone comes to you and says, I've got an advice from 2 different businesses about setting up trusts, or I'm now earning well and I want to protect my legacy for my family. What can you, maybe as a bit of a take-home value for the listener now, what can they kind of look at to start determining if they think it maybe is at that point where it becomes feasible, or if it's worthwhile, or if there's some sort of interest they have that a trust starts coming into the conversation?
Okay. Your first red flag: if bank charges and accounting fees are your problem, don't even go near it. A trust. I cannot tell you how many trust clients used to complain to me about bank charges and accounting fees. Then a trust is not for you. A trust is supposed to create one of 2 things: legacy, so you want to leave something for future generations, or it is there to protect your assets. So if you are an entrepreneur, you're a business person, and you carry certain risk, you want to ensure that you don't lose your assets. So you may buy your property in a trust. Now you have to decide, and that's where you have to do the proper advice and the proper calculations. If I buy my primary residence in my name, I get a primary residence exclusion. But if the business gets into trouble, I can lose that property. Okay. Now, if I bought it in a trust, I lose the primary residence exclusion, but it's protected in trust. Okay. Why is it protected in trust? Well, maybe the money was in the trust and there's no loan account to me. If there's a loan account to me, that loan account's open to risk. So we have to do the full discussion and go, well, is that property really protected or not? Or can I protect several different businesses from one another by means of several different trusts? You have to analyze this properly. And again, not being short-sighted and going, what am I doing in the next 12 months? We have to look at what are we doing 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, lifetime. Because setting up a trust is the least of your worries. Might cost you 10 to 20,000. But then you've got trustee fees. You've got accounting fees. You've got the nightmare, which many people go through every year, of the administration documents. I am talking bank statements, investment statements, if it's property owning, all the documents for the properties. And that is where a lot of people get into trouble, because they think they've got a trust. They chuck the trust deed in the drawer and never look at it again. And then all of a sudden, especially now, SARS is issuing final demands for the up to 2025 tax returns that have not been submitted. I mean, 2026 is not even due yet. And all of a sudden, people are getting final demands for tax returns that have not been submitted, financial statements that have not been submitted for trusts. And people go, yeah, but my trust is dormant. No, your trust is not dormant. When you formed that trust, in the deed, it said, I, the founder, give 100 Rand, 50 Rand, 500 Rand to this trust. That immediately activated the trust. Whether it was rands, cash, assets, doesn't matter what you put in that trust, you activated the trust. So when is a trust a good idea? If you want to leave a legacy, if you want to protect your assets from risk, and not when your assets are already 1 million, 100 million. I mean, when it's small and you know it's going to go big, then start and put your stuff in. Because the bigger the asset value, the more difficult it is to make it disappear into trust. Yeah. You're creating loan accounts. And this unicorn that everyone talked about, Section 42, where you could move the assets into trust, that now falls under the ambit of Section 7C for tax purposes also. So, every time we think we've got a loophole to do things, SARS will close that loophole. Yeah. So, and rightly so. So at the end of the day, a trust serves a purpose, not to hide from tax. It serves other purposes. And certainly, if you are a high net worth individual, a trust may very well be for you. But understand the implications of it and understand the responsibility. It's not like a puppy that you get and then don't want to look after. You need to look after it. It's a lifelong commitment, like a child.
Probably not as expensive as my puppies, but yeah, it is a commitment. It's kind of like having a business in a sense. You have meetings to discuss
Yes.
how it's run. You pay for annual financial statements, tax submissions, you pay provisional taxes, you pay all these things, and it needs to pay for itself. And if you have like tons of buildings in it, but they're not 1 cent of liquid cash, you need to keep putting
Mm,
money into it for it to be able to pay its bills. So a trust is there for legacy and asset protection. And for all the people that constantly come to me and say, I want to open a trust for tax savings, the game has finished. It's no longer the case anymore. Maybe a savings upon death, estate duty by
mm,
freezing your estate, so to speak. But people normally, when it comes to tax, they mean on interest earned, on capital gains, on
mm.
income earned. And it's not, that ship has sailed. So thank you, Renata. Thank you so much. You've given us so much value. There's so much here. I haven't even touched on some things that are also extremely important, like wills and that. So I don't want to put you under pressure, but if I contact you leading up to Wills Week, do you think you would pop in for a short
Certainly.
segment about how we can help people out there think about their wills?
Certainly. I think wills are
Awesome.
very, very important. I always say to people that a will is the full stop after your estate plan, because people often want to start with the will. You can't start with a will because you don't actually know what should go in that will until you've done a proper estate plan.
The will is the full stop after your estate plan. Thank you. I want to send it off to my lawyer to trademark. I will allow you to use it for free, but no one else is. Thank you. And then what I'm going to do is so everyone can see it at the bottom of the description of the video, we will put your link to your online profile, Renata. So anyone who
Thank
wants to
you.
contact you, set up a meeting, see what you're about, they can click on that link, click through to you, not just for members of the public, but also colleagues of mine who watch this. Renata adds a lot of value to financial planners, lawyers, and accountants to be able to make sense of the estate planning for the families you serve. So thank you so much, Renata. I really appreciate it. You've given us a lot to think about and chew on. I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, keep well.
Thank you very much. It's been great.